But thank you for joining us all today. My name is Joni. I'm a marketing manager for the small law team at LexisNexis. I'm personally really excited about this webinar today. We've partnered up with some of the best business coaches and consultants in the country to help provide you with a little bit of insight and guidance into how to approach making big strategic changes to your practice, particularly right now during COVID-19. So today we have Paulette Norum, we have Gary Mitchell, and Susan Van Dyke joining us to lead the conversations. And then we also have Colin Smith and Timon Sisic from the LexisNexis team. So what that means is we have a lot of experts on hand today to help answer all of your questions. We are hosting a fairly large audience, so if you do have any technical difficulties during the webinar, please first try to just log out and come back in. Usually that will solve the problems, but if it doesn't, we also have Fei Shen, who's currently letting everybody into the meeting, available as tech support. So you can reach her at the contact information that I'm about to post in the chat, and just send her an email if you have any questions. A little bit of housekeeping before we get to the experts. So the first hour of this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be provided to everybody who is registered. The optional breakout rooms at the end of the webinar will not be recorded. LexisNexis Canada has been approved as an accredited provider of professionalism content by the Law Society of Ontario, and this program contains 1 hour of professionalism content for lawyers located in Ontario. I apologize to everybody who is outside of Ontario, but I promise this webinar will be well worth your time and you will take a ton of value from it. So our agenda today is as follows. We'll start off with a general discussion around strategy and planning before jumping into a mini case study. The case study will be available in the chat. As soon as I'm done speaking, I'll post it for you. And you can download that and follow along with that session, which will be the first session that we cover today. Once we're done, we'll jump into our 30-minute live Q&A with our panel, and then follow that up with the 30 minutes of breakout rooms. This webinar will wrap up promptly at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. As you may have noticed, or you will soon notice, we will be releasing polls throughout the webinar. These polls will help inform myself as well as the team on which questions you really want us to answer during the live Q&A. So please do engage with them. It'll just make it easier for us to provide exactly the content that you're looking for today, if everyone's very engaged. So I highly encourage everyone to answer as many polls as possible. And once you've answered your first poll of the day, if you have questions that you'd like us to try to get to during the live Q&A session, you can just drop those into the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat and pulling questions from today and combining those with questions that we received during registration, so that we can try to get our panelists to answer as many questions as possible for everyone. So now, without further delay, I would like to introduce Paulette and Timon, who will be leading a discussion around strategy and planning for change. And then they'll take us through a short case study scenario that will really put what they've just discussed into practice for everyone. So please welcome Paulette and Timon, who will give a brief introduction to themselves before jumping right in. And I will mute myself and post the case study for you to download right now.
Okay. Thank you, Joni. I'll introduce myself first, and then I'll pass it over to Paulette. My name is Timon Sisic. I'm a practice area consultant with LexisNexis Canada. I'm a former civil litigator and corporate lawyer. I help clients with LexisNexis with finding solutions, technical solutions, software solutions that are tailored to their needs, whether they're in family law, wills, trusts, and estates, litigation, corporate law, across the small law segment and across the corporate segment. So my role is essentially to help make sure that you have the tools that you need to practice effectively, whether it be precedents or practice notes or anything along those lines. We make sure that that's as efficient as possible. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll pass it over to Paulette for her introduction.
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here today. I think this is an exciting discussion with a lot of diverse thoughts and opinions on it. So I'm actually really looking forward to learning myself. So I approach this twofold. I'm a professional coach, and actually I'm celebrating 10 years this month. And before that, I practiced as a civil litigator for over 13 years. As a coach, I focus on working with lawyers, sole practitioners, small firms, businesses on their business design. And so what I can help is to bring a strategy to your decision making process, which is what I and how I approach the conversation today. So let's get into the conversation. And what I'm going to do right now is screen share that. So the title that I gave for the topic today adopt a decision-making process to adapt your practice. In the blink of an eye, the practice of law changed this year. Our workspaces changed, client behavior changed, demand changed, our whole lives changed. Like many businesses, law firms need to consider new ways to achieve their goals, whether that means expanding into new practice areas, digging deeper into their areas of practice, or mitigating revenue loss. Solving for these will take creative ideas and innovative solutions. And not even coaches or consultants like myself are experts in this new space. But what people like myself and my colleagues on this program today are able to do is to help you be strategic in your firm's planning. And the key to any strategy is decision making. And because it's decisions that determine the future of your firm, it's well worth the time to think about the decisions that you're making. Are you making good decisions on behalf of your firm or practice? The other piece to consider, because our minds have the infinite capacity to rationalize after making a decision, we have to be transparent about the thought process leading to any decision. And doing that really allows us to learn from our decisions and their consequences. And so the best way that I know how to help you today with the time that we have is to provide you with a framework to map out your decision making process when you're working towards any goal. That way you can apply it right away. And we'll also be working on that case study that Joni mentioned, which will help to deepen the framework that I'm going to be teaching you. The first thing, though, is I want to highlight some common challenges that we all face when making decisions in a business context. Do you go into problem solving right away? Do you have a goal in the first place? Do you think that you can't afford to be creative? Do you have an authentic brand? Now, I thought it would be fun for all of us to see what we each struggle with, because sometimes it's helpful to hear that we're not alone in the struggles that we face, particularly if many of those on the program, as I understand, are sole practitioners. So, Faye, can you put up the poll relating to the common challenges that we all face, please? So, of those four challenges, which one is your biggest? Maybe right now, which one is your biggest? So choose the one that you are really sort of struggling with historically, maybe as a pattern, or one that you're struggling with right now. So I'm going to end that and see, or maybe Faye, you can end that. I'm not sure who is supposed to end that, if it's me or you. Great. Can everyone see those results? Faye?
Yes, everybody can see this result.
So it seems like there is a close tie between going into problem solving right away. Thank you, Faye, so much for doing that. And not having a goal in the first place. Fewer people don't struggle with the creativity piece or the brand. So it's really helpful to hear what we all struggle with, and we can stop sharing that, Faye. Thank you. And we're going to talk about a few of these right now, actually. Fear. In challenging times, it's tempting to jump straight into action mode, isn't it? This may address the immediate situation, but not necessarily the real problem that needs solving. How many of you made knee-jerk reactions during the pandemic? Did you buy more toilet paper than needed because everyone else was? You see, that's the most debilitating impact of fear. It's the negative emotion it creates in all of us. When we become worried or anxious, our brains become focused on eliminating the potential threat and finding safer ground. And that survival instinct, when it kicks in, it can really be difficult to think creatively about our current challenges. And that's why fear can be one of the biggest blockers to innovation. The point is we need to be comfortable being uncomfortable with the evolving state of the pandemic. Wouldn't you agree? So when every other law firm is reporting to be slashing salaries and laying off staff, resist the urge to follow immediately. It's important to first assess what is appropriate for your law firm or practice. So for example, will clients see a disconnect between the new practice area you're offering versus the old ones? Could this hurt your brand equity in the long run? Let me ask you this. Do you think that creative thinking has a role to play in discerning and meeting your goals right now? You know, it's interesting because people often associate creativity in businesses with tech or in industries like media or the arts. But creativity, imagination, and a willingness to experiment are mission critical for every business right now. I like the story of how one business in Scotland adapted during the pandemic to illustrate this point. Meet Reuben, our trusty pony. Reuben is the mascot of a children's shoe shop called Susie and Sam's. When lockdown restrictions eased, the owner opened up her garden to do shoe fittings outside. Children were kept entertained with Reuben. And Reuben was also the star of the company's Facebook page. This small shop sold more than 300 pairs of shoes during the lockdown. Their response was creative, and they didn't need to spend a dime to come up with it. All they did was work with what they had. And what's ironic is that most people think that unlimited resources are what fuel innovation. But like Reuben, did you know that the best ideas are born from creative constraints? Studies actually show that when options are limited, people generate more
Trying
varied
trying to
solutions.
unmute this thing I'm on.
Sorry, Paulette, it seems like you've muted yourself, or you might be muted at the moment.
Thank you. I think
Mhm.
when we all got muted, that's what happened. Thank you very much. So the studies actually show that when options are limited, people generate more varied solutions. On the other hand, with unlimited resources, the research suggests that we remain stuck in our old ways of thinking. So constraints, they really create an environment that demand we explore ideas that would otherwise remain untapped. Creative and strategic thinking are at the heart of innovation, and it can be learned and it can be nurtured in any business. So, law firms, you are no exception. In fact, law firms that adopt formal processes to capture, develop, evaluate, and implement ideas are successful at distinguishing themselves in a hyper competitive environment. Speaking of distinguishing your firm or practice, does your firm have a brand? I like Seth Godin's definition of a brand. It goes like this: it's the set of expectations, memories, stories, and relationships that, taken together, account for a consumer's decision to choose one product or service over another. If a consumer doesn't pay a premium, make a selection, or spread the word, then no brand value exists for that consumer. Do you recognize this brand? Do you have memories, stories, and expectations related to this brand, whether in the positive or in the negative? Brands that have a clear, consistent voice are better prepared for a crisis. Knowing where your brand stands from the start creates an authentic sense of security for everyone when dealing with the unknown. And that's because authentic brands have a value system that underpin the company's existence, operation, and direction. So, what's important to think about during the pandemic is how your brand can respond to people's pain in a way that's aligned with your business's core values and offerings, not the other way around. So, what you do, what you say, should strengthen and show who your firm is amid this challenge, not muddy it. In this current market, with sensitivities even higher, it's crucial that your external messages aren't tone deaf. So make sure your clients' needs are up front first. Make it clear how you help people. One of the reasons why law firms will stay in business, as they have after every other economic crisis, is that people need lawyers, but they need lawyers who are helpful, not boastful. So, we've talked about three common challenges to decision making in a business: fear, creativity, and branding. Let's now move to how we can make decisions that actually overcome these challenges. And I'm going to share my own technique with you. It's called creative choices. It's a 5 step process, and it incorporates the best of legal strategy, conflict resolution, and business design principles. Afterwards, we'll talk about that case study, and you'll have access to these slides after the program today. So, step one, goal planning. This one is obvious, but as we said and saw earlier on, it's one that we struggle with. And so it's worth mentioning that we really need to define the end goal or the ideal future that we're working towards. Because without a goal, you could be doing anything, it really wouldn't matter. And what's more, without a goal, you don't have anything to measure. So, taking the time to frame the issue properly is key. And you know what? That's not new to us as a skill as lawyers. We do that for our clients all the time. It's just that we don't always know how to do it for ourselves. So I want you to ask yourself, what is the current situation? What is the ideal outcome? What's the real problem here? And don't automatically accept an initial framing of the issue. Seek many perspectives and look at it from many angles. This is where creativity comes into play, and it costs nothing to do. Simply stand in the place of your client and walk through the problem from their perspective. What are the assumptions that you're making, and challenge them? What evidence do you have that there is a problem? Is it isolated? Is it chronic? How can the problem be measured? So, some key questions that can really get the ball rolling on goal planning. Step 2, criteria for success. Once you know what your goal is, then it's helpful to know what must exist for the goal to be a success. Criteria are internal features as well as external ones, like the software and systems you need, staffing and office space, to things like generating more consultations from a specific market, letting more people know about your services, securing certain types of speaking engagements. Timon, are there any products or services that you'd like to highlight that might be of interest to the audience at this stage?
Yeah, and I did want to tie this back to the concept of creativity. Our clients mostly come to us, not mostly, but very frequently come to us simply asking for databases of precedents. Precedents are one of the most commonly requested things. And when we think of creativity and we think of a precedent, they don't seem to be something that goes together really. You think, okay, there's a structure, there's a certain guide, we follow that guide and we just go through with that. But I'd like to challenge that thought a little bit and go to say that whether you're practicing in family law, criminal law, civil litigation, corporate, commercial, when you have these types of guides or precedents or practice notes, or even if it's a checklist for a certain procedure, it can tend to nurture a level of creativity because, Paulette, as you were saying earlier, there are constraints and creativity sort of go hand in hand. Structure goes hand in hand. Unlimited resources and unlimited options tend to overwhelm us, and these types of materials can help you to think more creatively because you have a greater toolkit. The metaphor I like to think of is if you're a painter and you're provided with a new set of paints, that they are very structured. They come in a nice box, but they don't. They're not restricting your ability to paint. They're actually expanding it because your toolkit is expanded. Speaking specifically, of course, LexisNexis does provide access to practice notes and precedents through the tool called Practical Guidance, previously known as Lexis Practice Advisor. And also, as everyone knows, as everyone's very familiar with, texts that run you through the whole process from start to finish and whatever you're looking to do. Now, of course, that's the starting point, and then from there you can build creatively to make sure that you distinguish yourself from your peers, from the peers in your area of practice, and make sure that the client is getting the customized approach that's required. But I just want to challenge the thought that abiding by or using guides or precedents or in any way stunts creativity, and I really think that it goes in the other direction. So the point being is use of text guides, secondary materials, all those types of things that we can offer will help to nurture that type of creativity, especially in a time like this where things can be uncertain. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I really appreciate the illustration that you used about an artist, because I agree. Many people think that artists are creative because they have, and maybe some, but sort of unlimited resources, ideas. But if you think about it, if they're working with a medium, and a certain, muse. Those are constraints. And there's a quote from a coach in the United States called Matthew May, and he's got this great quote that says, "Creativity thrives under intelligent constraints."
Mhm.
And I think it's really true.
Yeah.
So, for more criteria here, one of the pieces that you'll need to know is what your staff and employees need in order to work towards that goal. So it's really important to consult them as well. Would be poor planning on your part to execute and be working towards this goal and realize there's some key pieces of equipment or precedents, things that your staff and employees needed that you didn't account for. Employees should always feel like their ideas are valued and can be taken seriously. The other criteria I think it's important to design for success up front is, how is a decision going to be made in the end? So if you're working towards a goal and the decision about the strategies that will be adopted, is it going to be a decision by consensus, majority, something else? It designing these things up front will save you headaches later on. So that's step 2, criteria for success. Step 3, choices. To make good decisions, you need a set of feasible options. And this actually should be easier to do now that you have a list of criteria. You also want to generate alternatives that achieve your goal. And I think it's also important to highlight here, like, you shouldn't be judging or evaluating these choices at this stage. You just are brainstorming and writing down as many as you can. And to get a diverse set of choices, you need to seek a diversity of thinking and skills and background. So you can do this by bringing in professionals or trusted individuals who have no part in your firm, who can bring a fresh perspective. This will guard against bias, and it can also produce creative friction. So choices, that's your step 3. Now we're going to prioritize. I want you to evaluate each option at this stage and this stage only. How much does each choice contribute to the goal? So look at things like costs, benefits, financial impact, resources, intangibles like your reputation, time, feasibility, risk, and ethics. And at this stage, this would be the only stage where it would be wise to make a list of the 10 worst things that could happen. Once you know the most important uncertainties, the ones that could really hurt you, you'll be in a better position to allocate time and resources to reducing those areas of uncertainty. And at this stage, with those uncertainties, you may need to rejig your options. So after prioritizing, you are in step 5. You're poised to make a decision. And this step becomes the easiest if you've taken all the steps leading up to this point. The right choices should be clear. Realistically, though, our personal preferences can creep in. And so making a decision might not be the easiest, in which case you'll have to consider the pros and cons of each option and hash each one out, even returning to the assumptions and the goal in the first place. And once a decision is made, you'll need to document all the criteria, the alternatives considered, and the reasons for the final decision, along with what was ruled out and why. This is where you can look to in case you need to make changes going forward. And the first action to take once you've made a decision is to communicate it. And what's interesting here is that lawyers tend to be risk averse. They view communication as a liability. But the research shows that transparency creates trust. And trust matters when it comes to building relationships with existing and new clients. So law firms that embrace communication as a form of advocacy will stand to mitigate the economic risks of the pandemic. An important part of any decision-making process or working towards a goal is that you're going to be putting habits, behaviors into practice. You're going to want to reflect on the impact and readjust if needed. So assign someone or a team to track the success of your goal. That will be important. And finally, whatever decisions you take right now, make sure you take the time to reinforce your focus on clients and define your core messages as a business. Authenticity and humanity will go a long way. Brands that prioritize building a community that fosters trust and connections above all will outperform those that don't. So 5 steps. And there's that case study that Joni mentioned is in the chat box. There are 4 recommendations or 4 goals in particular, I believe, on the second page that I'll be really focusing on. Let's apply what we've learned to this case study. If I were working with this firm, if I was called in to help them assess their options, and I was given these 4 goals, I wouldn't actually accept them at face value. And neither should you in your own business. You need to dig deeper, as you saw from the first step in goal planning, and understand where the goal is coming from, what it's designed to accomplish, and how each one of them aligns with the firm's brand and values. Basically, if I was brought in at a late stage like this, I would be starting with their decision, so their decision on the 4 goals that they've chosen, and reverse engineering that 5-step process in a conversation, maybe at a first meeting, to really understand what was motivating their decisions behind those 4 goals. So let's focus on that.
Hi, Paulette. It's just Joni here. Just on the timekeeping. So we are past the halfway mark.
Okay.
So what I think we will be best for the audience is if we provide your solution that you have via email after the event with our on-demand version, so that we don't have to cut the breakout rooms or the Q&A short. So I apologize for that, but I do want to make sure that we stay on time today.
Excellent. So I will share those questions and thoughts that I was thinking about when it came to the 4 goals, but more importantly, you have the 5-step process that you can work with, and you'll get the slides so that you can do that.
That would be brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we will move into the live Q&A portion of the event. So as I mentioned earlier and in the chat, if you do have questions that you would like to submit to our panel, please just type them into the chat and I'll be pulling from there, as well as from questions that have already been submitted during the registration process. So now I would like to welcome the remaining panelists for today. So we have Gary Mitchell, Susan Van Dyke, and Colin Smith, who will be joining us on a panel. Timon will also stay kind of in the wings in case we have any technical product questions he may jump in for. So if I can please get our 3 panelists to join us with cameras on and mics ready to go. I'd just like to ask everyone to do a brief introduction first, just to let everyone know who you are and what your background is. And then we'll move into the first set of questions. So if I can please get Gary and then Susan and then Colin to make your introductions, we'll take it from there.
Unmute. Gary, you're on mute, Gary. Sorry.
Okay. Hi there. Sorry about that. I'll be very brief so we get into the actual informative information for you today. I've had the pleasure of working with lawyers and law firms since 2005, from startup all the way through to retirement and succession and everything in between. I truly love working with you people. You're intelligent. When you're shown certain steps, you learn very quickly. And one of the biggest things I'm passionate about is seeing the results that you will achieve. I'm happy to be a part of this, Joni. Thank you.
Great, Susan, over to you.
Hi, thanks. Welcome, everyone. Thanks, LexisNexis and everyone for hosting this seminar, this webinar. Great presentation, Paulette. Thanks for that. I'm Susan Van Dyke, based out of Vancouver with my colleague Gary, who's also in Vancouver. I've been in legal marketing for a little more than 25 years, so I have a really interesting history of, working with lawyers when legal marketing was not even a thing back then, right through to this pandemic. So it's been an interesting career, that's for sure. So I run a marketing agency working pretty much solely with lawyers and law firms. I've worked on everything from small firms to global firms. So looking forward to answering your questions, and please use the chat. We're looking forward to seeing what you need today.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Colin Smith and I'm the Director of Marketing for LexisNexis Canada. And of course, we have overseas responsibilities as well with the US team, which we work very closely aligned with them, and indeed our global team at RELX, which most of you are familiar with. And so my role is marketing throughout Canada. My background is marketing. I have been in marketing for over a decade. And as you probably can tell, I've been in technology for quite a while. And so it's also helping you from a perspective of how does technology really help you in a legal framework, especially now that we're going through a COVID, practical ways in which technology and marketing can help your business. And most importantly, Paulette touched on it, is how do you make sure that your brand is relevant at this particular time? How do you differentiate yourself so that someone will say, that is the brand of lawyer that I want to deal with? So those are some of the things that we look forward to in this web session.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. So I'm just going to jump right in. So the first question that we had submit during registration, Gary, I'm going to send this one over to you and make you start things off today. So the first question is, what recommendations or strategies would you suggest for a solo practitioner who has just opened up their practice? And then in brackets, it's how do I do it right the first time during COVID-19?
First of all, I think that's my favorite question. I've worked with a lot of startups. The first thing I would say to get it right from the beginning is focus on being the lawyer and build a team of professionals around you with expertise in various fields. So many times I come across lawyers who are, and rightfully so, it's not just lawyers, it's anyone in a startup business. They feel they have to do everything on their own. But if you actually break things down and do the math of what you are billing an hour and what you would pay an expert like Susan to do your website, or other experts around technology, accounting, and so on, if you do the math, you come out far ahead. So first of all, you're getting things set up professionally from the beginning and right, the systems and processes, the marketing, the branding, as Colin brought up. So the first thing I would say is build a team around you. You know, one of my favorite books is from Jim Collins. It's called Good to Great. And the two things I take away from that book, the biggest two things are, first of all, get the right people on the bus. In other words, the right people on your team, and then get them in the right seats. And if you do that, you're going to become profitable from the very beginning. You have to think longer. Paulette brought up reverse engineering. And when I'm working with clients, the first step is get the right people. Second step is, not in that particular order, but get the plan together, right? Look at your end game. And I love how she brought up reverse engineering. Look at your end game. What's your end goal? What do you want to create here? This is your baby, whatever it is, whatever practice area you're in. So look at the ultimate goal. And then we look at reverse engineering, 10 years, 5 years, 2 years, 1 year, 2 months, 2 weeks, today. What do you start doing today to put these things in action? I want to give you one brief example. One of my favorite testimonials is from a family lawyer here in Vancouver. And she says, the one time I didn't listen to Gary, it cost me thousands of dollars. Very brilliant young family lawyer, left a prominent firm in Vancouver and started her own firm. She contacted me and she was in the middle of doing a photo shoot and building her website. And she said, I want to get that done first before I bring you on. I'm like, no, bring me on now. Well, it turns out, unfortunately, she wasted a lot of money in that process. But just this year, she won, or she was nominated as the top leading female leader of a law firm in BC. and was on the Globe and Mail's top 400 fastest growing companies in Canada. But had she had that opportunity to bring people on at the beginning, she would have saved a lot of money. So again, I go back to be the lawyer, be the best lawyer you can be, and then surround yourself with other professionals.
I think that's a great answer.
Can I add to that, Joni?
Yeah,
I
of
love
course.
that, Gary. Is that okay if I jump in? So, Gary, I think what and you and I have talked about this in the past, it's the economics of law, investing back in your firm. And that's something that I've talked to law firms and individual lawyers about for many years. And I think with the pandemic, what we've seen is where some firms have had the absence of that investment, they're having to catch up now, whether it's technology. Colin probably could speak at length about that, the technology catch up on what some firms have had to do, but also just the investment in what they don't do well. We can't all be good at all things, and to really recognize what you either don't like to do or what you're not good at doing, and hire the right people, make a good decision, hire good people, get the right products, LexisNexis products in place or whatever you need, and move forward. I think it's fair to say, Gary and I have talked at length about this, and some of our favorite clients are those that are thoughtful about hiring external people, and then they get the advice and they get on with it. And they get out of their own way, actually, to be honest, they get out of their own way. Colin's laughing, but you know what I mean, right?
I know exactly what you mean.
It's like what lawyers are asking their own clients to do. And I have walked the halls with many lawyers who are banging their heads against the wall, probably rightly so, that their own clients haven't taken the advice that they've paid for.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes, if I can jump in there again, is Abraham Lincoln, and I'm paraphrasing, says the person who represents themselves has a fool for a client. So that's Abraham Lincoln. Gary Mitchell says the lawyer who does everything has a fool for a boss.
I just wanted to jump in here because on the other side of the coin, I think it's, and I'll leave that. I'd like to hear from Susan and Gary because you guys are the experts on this. But what I've experienced is with solo lawyers and small 2 to 3 law firms, the thing that you can often have an issue with, as compared to a large firm, is just that wealth of information that isn't formalized per se, but that you just have at a large or mid-sized firm where by just being in the hallways there. So to make up for that, at every lawyer that you know in other firms, friends that you have, add them on a WhatsApp group that you talk to informally, where you share information, not share information in a seminar format per se, but when somebody runs into something and they bump into something and they go, this is this crazy thing that happened to me today. It's an informal way that you learn every day. You maintain those connections and you learn quite a bit. And I know when I was in practice that really helped me as a young lawyer. So building that network outside of your firm, not just as in the form of a formal network, like this is the person I refer to, this is the person I refer this to, but people that you talk to regularly about your day-to-day, it starts to integrate into your expertise, and you can build off of that rather than just sitting there alone and then turning to somebody and retaining them for something if it's outside of your area of practice. But that's all. I just wanted to jump in with that in the context of surrounding yourself with other professionals as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And I think one of the things that I've seen is the barriers to asking for help, and really understanding where you need that help. And even if you don't know where you need the help, but as we discovered on the poll, just knowing that you don't have goals is a great place to start. I don't know where I should be going. I need to take inventory. I need a coach. I need somebody to take me by the hand and guide me gently to where I think I want to go. And it's okay to not have all the answers. And I will also say that, the panelists here, I mean, and many of our colleagues, it's a safe place to go. And I just want to say that, and certainly with your colleagues at LexisNexis, it's a safe place to go to say, I don't know what I'm doing. I need some help. I don't have all the answers. Yeah, Colin.
I was just jumping in. We talk a lot around goals, and sometimes from my marketing experience, you may know I'm an international speaker, but I also am a storyteller. And it's also important for us to understand what is the story I want to tell for my business. So we talk about goals a lot. For example, one of the things stepping back and going is, how do I set a proper goal? And just a quick tip to help you to set a proper goal. We talk about a goal being SMART in marketing, and it's good for lawyers as well. So a goal without, for example, a time on it just becomes a wish.
Yeah.
Think of the acronym SMART if you're going to set a goal. Is the goal specific? Going to do this by X date, and this is the resources I need and what I need for it. So that's the S. Is it measurable? Can you really measure that? Because you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So we talk about M. Is it attainable, which is the A? Is your goal attainable? Are you going to set something that frustrates you and you just bang your head against the wall? Or is it realistic in this COVID period? Is it really attainable? And then is it realistic? Can you really see that the scope of that goal that you set is realistic for you to attain it with the resources you have? And then finally, is it time bound? When do you want to accomplish it by? So if you just think of the word SMART in that sense, from a marketing perspective and from a legal perspective, that will help you to structure a really smart goal. And that's a good starting point to look at your business as this, because the environment has changed. So it's good now to look back and go, how is my goal smart? Will it work for me in this environment as well?
I think that's great. I hope that that discussion helped answer the question. I'm going to move on to the next question now. This one, I believe, was written perfectly for Susan, so I will pass it over to her. So what are the most important considerations for marketing strategy from a specialized boutique law firm? For example, what trends should I be paying attention to? What should I be doing with my website? And what about social media? So I'll pass that over to Susan to start, but the rest of the panel can jump in as you guys are able to add value.
Thanks, Joni. Yeah, please jump in. I did have a preview of this question, I will admit, and I wanted to give some really practical suggestions that are actionable, that you can get lift off on right away. And I can send these to you following. I'm going to have a list here, so just feel free to ping me and I'll send you this list. So no need to take mad notes if it's of interest to you. I have a list of 6 quick things. I'm going to go rapid fire. Of the 6 essential things that you should probably, without knowing any of you, that you should probably take care of. And these are in no particular order, but the theme is really reinvesting back into your business and your practice. So stepping aside from being the lawyer and thinking of yourself as a business owner, what I would suggest is nail the basics. That's my first tip, nail the basics. I keep hearing from clients on the simplest of things that you can take care of. Things like timely responsiveness. In BC, the biggest complaint in the Law Society here is responsiveness from lawyers. That's something that we could generally take care of pretty quickly. So nail the basics in terms of client service. Don't give a client a reason to leave you. So nail the basics. Number 2, find a niche within your area of law to lean into. It doesn't mean exclusively, but if you're a family lawyer, that might be a number of different things. It might be negotiating same-sex separations. It could be any kind of area where you have credible expertise that you can speak to and point to, and that can go across any practice area. If you have a niche, lean into it and be a specialist in that area. One of my third tip is know your client. This comes up in research. It's come up in research probably for the last 10 years, and the top 3 things what clients are looking for. For those of you in business, know your client's business, know their business, invest in understanding what's keeping them awake at night. Number 4, if you don't have a LinkedIn yet, a LinkedIn page for yourself, please go and do that right after this session. And if you need help, I'll give you a free 15 minutes to get your LinkedIn page up. Not kidding, drives me crazy. It's an easy one. And I've literally sat beside lawyers and got that going in a very safe, non-threatening way. And you can manage the privacy in any way that you like, but please have a LinkedIn page and get your digital footprint going. That's an easy one for you to take care of. Number 5, build strong network of industry leaders, champions, and referral sources. Get your people around you, get them working with you and for you, earn their trust. And that's the easiest way. And certainly Paulette and Gary can talk a lot about the coaching around that, but that's going to be a really essential component to your success. 6th point I've mentioned already, get some help. And I can't underscore that enough. This is not a solo or a small firm, you know, this is a team sport. You really find the help that you need, whether on this panel or elsewhere. Just I really encourage you to get help. It can be a little or a lot. The advantage of having a consultant or an agency is you have your hand on the tap, so you can get a lot or get a little. Set the budget and away you go. Those are my 6 tips. Is that 6? Did I miss anything? That's 6. Yeah. Rapid fire.
Perfect. I like it. Colin, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that, or did she cover it all off with her 6 tips?
I think the six tips covered it. The only one I would add is when she talked around client understanding. When you're trying to understand your client, understand what is the issue my client is facing. Because Einstein said that a well-defined issue is 90% solved. But many times we think because we have this product or solution, that's what our clients want. So it's just stepping back and listening to understand what do they want, what is the issue, and keep asking why. What is really driving the need for that client? And then by doing that client understanding, then you'll be able to provide an insightful solution rather than trying to retrofit what you have because you assume that's what the client needs.
And
Colin, I
can
love
say-
that.
Can I,
Sorry, Gary, just really quickly. Sorry, Colin, I love that because clients always tell me, I know what my clients will tell me. And I've done client audits and client surveys, and they tell them quite often something very different from what the lawyer believes they know about the client. Sorry,
Absolutely.
Gary.
I'll give you a typical example. In a small law firm, they were talking about a young female, and she's young, she's 25, and she's single. And the lawyer kept saying, I know everything about that. I've dealt with them over the years. But the client she had was young, 25 as well, but single, but had 3 kids. And she had a total different need state just because 3 kids are involved. And so if you just assume that they're all the same because they're 25 and that's their age, if you use just one metric, then you've totally lost where the need state of that client is, because her need state was more focused on now being a mother versus being a parent, versus being a single person, for example.
can I just point out another bonus from a business development and marketing point of view? When you take that service approach that Susan has brought up and Colin has supported, guess what? You're going to learn more about your potential clients. You're going to learn more about what their issues are, and you're going to learn more about how and where you can reach them. So I'm always saying to my clients, your clients will tell you everything you need to know in order to find more clients. So not only are you giving better service, which is always, like Susan pointed out, the best marketing tool you can do for any business, clearly. But they also give you a glimpse into where you find other clients. I find, in my experience, people, not only lawyers, I don't want to lawyer bash here, but people in business, especially when they're starting out or if we're going through a challenging time like we are now, you just have this, you have this reaction to go out and shout your message from the top of the mountain, not knowing if it's actually going to reach the people you need to reach to. You know, in my methodology, I use a formula called TST, targeted, strategic, and tactical. The first step is being targeted. This process that Susan has alluded to with marketing, it's service, and it's also giving you a formula to move forward to absolutely be in front of the right people and then do and say the right things to eventually bring more clients on.
Perfect. I'm going to move on to the next question just so we can try to get through as many as possible. So a hybrid of the question that just came through the chat and also one that we had sent through earlier. So how can I provide personalized services to clients while working remotely? How do you deal with difficult clients while working remotely when you don't get to have those face-to-face interactions and kind of the more human connection? So Colin, I'm going to pass this one over to you to start, but everybody else, please feel free to jump in.
Okay, so I think the essential thing we're trying to establish is have a goal. What do you want to establish? You want to provide a solution to your client, but you're now remote, so your situation has changed. But you also want to say, what's the standard? What's the customer experience that I want to deliver to my client? That should not change. So for Timon, I would see him in office and I would go to his office, I would sit down and be able to talk to him, but the circumstances have changed now. And there are many technologies that you can use that I should say doesn't replace face-to-face, but pretty much comes close to it. But it's not so much the technology, it's how do I want to maintain that customer experience? So you could use Zoom, you could use Microsoft Teams, you could use a host of what we call web conferencing features. But it's how do I use that particular tool? And so one thing that I've found with a lot of businesses and also legal firms is don't be averse to trying web conferencing technologies. Don't be averse to talks about using simple things like WhatsApp to create groups. But even more important, don't be afraid to talk to your clients through social media. Social media sometimes seems like the fancy to-do things. Oh, it's just a gimmick, it's a fad, TikTok, who cares about that? But there are actually very good social media tools that you can actually use to enhance your client experience. So if I can't come to you, and if I don't feel like just booking a call, can you create that WhatsApp group that I can just talk to you and get the information on demand when I need it? The beautiful thing too is with video is you can also use that as a key marketing tool, because then you can talk to multiple clients at the same time if that's what you need to do. But you can be very selective and saying, I know what Timon is looking for, and therefore this is the conferencing or technology tool that he's more comfortable with, and this is the one that I'm going to use. So it's not just what you find convenient for your client. Ask your client, what would you be comfortable with so that I can provide the same level of customer experience as if we were face-to-face? And the clients will tell you, they'll say, well, I'm not into emails, or I really like a phone call. Or if they're like, my nephew who is a lawyer at 28, he never calls, he's always on text. I don't know how his fingers still exist. So things like that, you get a range, but the clients will tell you, what am I comfortable with so that I can be very efficient in how I communicate, because you have to keep your goal that you want to maintain the same level of customer experience.
Perfect, thank you. I think we should have time for one more question. It's probably a little bit of a big one, so we might run a little bit over and we'll just shorten the breakout room sessions, but only by a few minutes. So the last question that we'll be able to get to today is, are there any major considerations or factors that people should take into account when deciding whether to use a short-term approach right now to kind of get by and survive the winter, or should they be using a long-term approach? So what type of considerations and factors should people be kind of mulling over and thinking about right now? And Gary, I'm going to send you into the deep end on that one first.
Thank you, Joni. I'm glad you acknowledged that you're throwing me in the deep end there. That's a biggie. And I'm going to try and be as broad as possible, because without knowing the specific situation of the lawyer or the firm, obviously financial comes to mind as being one of the first considerations. What is your current financial situation, your cash flow, your revenue, forecasted income for the next several months? I mean, ideally, I'm always a fan, as I mentioned earlier, looking at the long game, looking at what you ultimately want to do. One of the things that COVID has done for most people that have a heartbeat, it's caused us all to reflect on our lives, what's important to us. And that has crossed over to business as well. You see a lot of people transitioning to do different careers or different firms, going out on their own, leaving a firm, going on their own. I think the most important thing you can do right now is concentrate on what really matters to you, what you really want to achieve at the end of the day. So I'm still weighted towards the long-term vision. Having said that, there'd be, and without getting into details, because I don't know the details of each of the participants, in each situation, there'd be measurable questions to ask and considerations to take on how do you get through the short term to eventually end up where you want to get to. This is not the end of the world. It's a challenge. One of the things that I really believe in that will differentiate you from your colleagues and your peers, your competition. Well, many of them will bury their heads in the sand, frozen in scarcity. Those of you who rise to the challenge and take this opportunity to leap ahead of your competition are going to come out of this running, not crawling.
Joni, do we have a moment? Or are we going into breakout rooms? I
No,
just
no,
wanted
if
to
you
add
have
on.
something to add, please do. And then we'll wrap up
Yeah.
after everyone's had a chance to chime in.
Yeah, so I think at this time, I mean, many people have said this before, so I'm not the first to say it, but this is an opportunity right now when businesses slow down. It's ramping back up in the civil litigation area now with courts reopening, but it can be viewed as an opportunity to look at most of the time, most of the people that I've spoken to are in a constant state of catch up. There's always something in your files that's backed up and you're catching up and you don't have time to get that whatever practice management software that it is, or to optimize your accounting, or to get those office chairs that you needed, right? So it's sort of a if you've slowed down on the business side, if you've slowed down on the client acquisition side, it might be an opportunity to reconsolidate the business and do those things that you've always been putting off because there have been more important and more lucrative things to address. So in the spirit of thinking about goals and planning, you might want to sit down and think, okay, what's going to be better for me? Am I in the position right now to jump into a new area of practice to expand my potential revenue pool? You know, if I'm a civil litigator and I want to expand into bankruptcy, should I do that, or should I really focus down on my litigation practice? If I'm a family lawyer and I've been referring criminal matters out that come through the door, should I expand my practice into practicing criminal law, or should I really focus on the things that I've been trying to catch up on in my area of practice? And to do that, to Colin's point about having measurable metrics, if you will, I think it's a really good idea to keep track of every single time you've referred a client out because it's been outside of your wheelhouse. Keep a number. And then what happened from that? What was the goodwill that you gained from your peers from doing that? What was the goodwill that you gained from that client from doing that? And really evaluate, is that goodwill worth more than what you would have been able to do if you had kept that client? It might not be, but we sort of have these like vague ideas of what's good and what's bad and what we've done. And to Paulette's point earlier about it's easy to rationalize after the fact, but if you have that grading system ahead of time, it's easier to realize, okay, should I be really drilling down into what I'm already good at, or should I be pivoting with my practice?
Susan or Colin, is there anything that you'd like to add before we move into breakout rooms?
Sure. The only thing I would add to is probably stating the obvious, but just from a marketing perspective again, is that you never know what you don't know. And so it's very scary. The study that we did show that 60% of lawyers like yourself have said, I need to change my practice because of COVID. And so it's very scary going into a new area. And one thing that I always find is a good advice for someone taking on a role that as Timon says, you're probably going to uncharted territories. Think of it this way from a marketing perspective, that it's adding a bit more experience to the knowledge base that you already have, but there's always support to help you to navigate through that. And a shameless plug here, this is where LexisNexis is really convenient, because now you can have structure to how do I approach this new area, rather than feel like it's just a wealth of information and I'm drinking from a fire hose, as the expression goes. So think back and say, this is an area I'd love to go in. This is how I set my goals. Who is the best partner that can guide me through this process? And so you become a partnership that guides you as to how you get there, rather than you having to figure out all of that information. It's probably very intuitive and simplistic, but a lot of people just think it's too much information. It's too much. I stick to the evil I know and I stay to my area of practice. But if you're convinced that you have a partner that can guide you into how you want to go, then it makes practical sense.
Well, I was going to say, it goes back to Susan when she said, you know, when your clients go to you, they're going to you for your expertise. They're not trying to do it all on their own. So it's the same thing. It was a good point I wanted to highlight, Susan, you made earlier, is think like your clients do, right? Go to other experts and bring in help and support and focus on being a lawyer, the best lawyer.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Those strategic partnerships, and they may not be with other lawyers, they could be with an accounting firm or other professionals who are serving the needs of your clients. I did quickly want to say one of the trends, I've done a lot of work in the US in the last couple of years, and one of the trends in the US, back to your point, Colin, is analytics, pointing to analytics to inform and drive marketing strategies, not implementing marketing strategies because somebody thinks it's a really good idea. And it might be, but actually validating that strategy through analytics and data. And what I mean by that is actually tracking current clients, prospective clients' interests. And we don't have the time to go into that now, but I worked with a colleague in putting a dashboard together and working with AmLaw, 100 firms and looking at how do you actually track the interest of your community of people, clients and prospective clients, and giving them what they need. It was absolutely fascinating. And in a dialed down version in a small firm, of course, you don't have the resources to bring in such dashboards, and I'm sorry, LexisNexis, I don't know all of your products. It's hard to keep up with you guys. You're doing so much, but surely there's something for small firms that could help them track and help drive marketing for these folks on the call here. And I would love to work with some of you on that. I just think it's fascinating, and it's an intelligent means in which to drive your marketing activities and actually track the success of those activities.
Yes, and the only point, because of technology, I have to add is technology doesn't replace you, the human. It's not, now that I have technology, I'm less important. It is machine learning. It is now that I have technology, I'm even more efficient. And that's the thing is, when you talk of AI, we do a lot with machine learning. And even for our products with LexisNexis, we have LAQL, as we call it, LexisNexis. It's driven by technology. But sometimes you don't need to know what's under the hood. You need to know what the product is doing for your business. And so although we use AI and machine learning to make decisions faster, to look at cases, to aggregate cases, and to see trends and all of that, we do that already. So then you would benefit by saying, what does that mean to me? I can focus, as was said, on being a lawyer, because the technology behind the tools make me more efficient, make me more effective, and also make me more confident that I'm not missing a thing, especially if I'm a litigator to go in front of a judge.
Perfect. Thank you everyone for that. So I would really like to thank everyone for joining us on this webinar. We are just past the 3 o'clock mark. So we will be breaking off into the breakout rooms for anyone who does want to stay along. But before that, just kind of feeding off of the last response, if you are looking for new technology products and you would like a personalized consultation from somebody on the LexisNexis team, to either talk you through some of the new products or the new content that we have available. I am posting a link as I multitask here into the chat, and you can just sign up for one there. There's no obligations, no crazy sales pitch. It's purely just if you're looking for what are your options that could help you right now, we're happy to have that conversation with you. So I would like to extend a huge thank you to all of our guest speakers today, Paulette and Timon, Colin, Susan, Gary. I think everyone has had a lot of value taken from this webinar, and we really appreciate your time today. So for anyone who does not want to stay for the breakout rooms, we would just ask that you please leave the meeting now. Very politely ask that you please leave the meeting now, and they will help us separate everyone into 3 separate rooms, and we will rotate halfway through. So each room will get to see 2 consultants. And we just ask that because we expect the rooms to be a little bit on the big side, please just use the raise your hand feature. If you have any questions, or pop your questions in the chat, and we'll also be in there to help moderate as well. So thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and we hope to continue the conversation soon.